Ladies and gentlemen, welcome wrestling fans worldwide to Knoxville and the Great Smoky Mountains for the Ron Fuller Tennessee Studcast.
6 feet 9 inches tall, 265 pounds.
This historic podcast from one of the most respected and successful wrestlers and promoters will follow the footsteps of the largest and oldest wrestling family on the planet.
Listen to what I'm saying. That's right. Bring that camera in here a little bit closer.
Through 93 years and 4 generations.
The stud has arrived.
Old school or new fan, this unique broadcast will educate and captivate as Ron details decades of professional wrestling's growth with truly unforgettable stories.
I want those people out there at home to hear the stud.
Sit back and enjoy the ride with the Tennessee Stud.
The Tennessee Stud. You will learn that name. You will remember it.
And now,
the stud is here.
Hey everybody, welcome in once again. It is David Summers hosting another Studcast with the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. It's the story of wrestling in America as told by the stud, whose family started the profession 100 years ago. Now we step back into the ring, back into time. There ain't no hoss like the Tennessee Stud, Ron Fuller. Hey Ron, what's going on, man?
Oh, geez, man, just enjoying it. Got a little 60, close to 70-degree day out here today, and it's really beautiful, man. Big time rain, but other than that, it's pretty today. A lot of blue sky, man. Love to see that.
Yeah, a lot of the same here, and definitely warmed up. So we're hoping the groundhog was wrong because he said we were going to get 6 more weeks, and we just don't want 6 more weeks. But we'd have to take it as one day at a time, right?
That's it, man. And I get a little bit of that colder stuff than you do. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So being down there in South Alabama, you're getting a little bit warmer than me. And,
indeed, yeah. Listen, do you get a chance to come off the mountain very often? Are you stuck up on the mountain? What's the deal with you?
Yeah, I had to come off the mountain yesterday. As a matter of fact, had a computer problem, and I took it over to a gentleman that works on it in his home. But he lived on the east side of Newport, Tennessee, which is not too far from me. And wow, it's just amazing, Dave, how beautiful this part of the country is. This place where we went, man, it had a beautiful river, man, that just ran right along the side of the road.
Wow.
And big mountains on the backside of it.
Yeah.
Actually, the Smoky Mountain National Park's on the backside of that river. And wow, it was just beautiful. And then we went into a little area in which they had these hills that were about 300 or 400 feet straight up and down, and cows grazing on the side of them. I couldn't figure out, man, how they hanging there, man.
Because I think I figured it out. I think 2 of their legs are shorter than the other 2.
That sure make it look that way, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
They certainly make it look that way. But yeah, it was a beautiful trip. I got to see another part of this country that up here that's just fantastic, man. It's just amazing. Just about everywhere you go, you see something different, and it was a nice little ride yesterday. But I'm ready to go today, my man.
Hey, listen, you're always ready to go. And listen, last week we started talking about this, and I know you were about to turn 30 years old, and there was so much happening in your life. In February of 78, Ron, I can't wait to hear where we're going to be riding this week. So how about a little tease about what's in store for us today? Because I know you got something planned big time.
Well, we're going to visit 2 territories again today. That's where we are now. We're really, really close to opening the 2nd territory. We're going to spend some time down there today, and this one on the Gulf Coast with Southeastern Pensacola. And we're actually going to be within just a few days of the first matches ever in that territory in Dothan, Alabama, on Friday night, March the 3rd, 1978. Actually, is on my 30th birthday.
Really? So you are opening a new wrestling company on your 30th birthday. I mean, was that intentional? Did you plan that?
Well, no, you would think I did maybe, but
Right.
no, Dave, it wasn't intentional. And it happened that way because I had dates from Vince McMahon Sr. on Andre the Giant. And those dates were booked about 3 months in advance of this March the 3rd date. And, so I was going to have Andre the Giant, and he was booked to wrestle in Knoxville. On this trip, he, for the first time, was going to be able to stay multiple days because Andre enjoyed himself so much every visit here.
Mhm.
He had asked Vince to give him at least 3 or 4 days down there in that territory.
Yeah.
So, because, man, he really, really loved Knoxville in this area. So, So Vince gave him to us for not the 3 or 4 days he asked for. He gave him to us for 5 days.
Wow.
So he came in basically on Wednesday, March the 1st, which is just then basically about the next Studcast or so.
Yeah.
And he left on the following Monday, March the 6th. So the opening date, man, as soon as I got those dates from Vince 3 months earlier, I looked at my calendar and that I set my opening night for Southeastern Pensacola to be on one of those dates that Andre was in town. And what better way to open a new territory than with the most recognizable wrestler in the world on the card,
Yeah.
So that in itself kind of made a big statement to fans in that part of the country that something very big, literally, no pun intended, was about to happen there.
Yeah.
And it also meant Andre would be there in Southeastern Pensacola for the next day, and he was going to be on the first live TV show ever done by Southeastern in WTVY studios.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, literally, you were knocking it out of the park on your first 2 days in business there, Ron. Opening up with Andre the Giant. Speaking of knocking it out of the park, I heard you've been doing that too on your Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel. I knew you got some new stuff happening. Tell us what's going on there.
Well, yes, man, we surely do. I sent out messages on social media not too long ago, hoping fans could help me find some unseen Southeastern wrestling shows from 1978 until Continental started in 1985. And that started to produce a lot of activity and some discovery of some new shows that have never been seen on YouTube. So I'm adding these shows to my chart of Southeastern Pensacola TV shows produced on WTVY TV in Dothan, Alabama.
Are you kidding? Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I've got people now that are sending me shows that, and a lot of them I can't see that they've ever been shown on YouTube before.
Wow.
So I'm compiling as many of these TV shows from that time frame as possible before I start to add any of them to the Southeastern Rewind channel, because I want to run them in that order that I promised people that I was going to do, in the order they were produced.
Yeah.
So when I'm confident that I have as many of these as possible, the classic Southeastern wrestling TV shows will start coming every week, man. I'm going to start throwing them on there, and then we're going to see Southeastern shows that a lot of them have never been seen on YouTube.
Yeah.
So the big news for today is, until we get the Southeastern TV shows lined up, we have found something, Dave, that you're going to really, really find to be truly amazing. We've discovered some TV shows from the old Gulf Coast territory, and that was there right before Southeastern started. Right before we went in there, it was the territory that had been there before us.
Yeah.
And we're going to begin to show those shows one per week, every Monday on the YouTube channel.
All right, so let me get this right. You found TV shows from the 1970s produced by Gulf Coast Wrestling with old stars from that era. Now, and when you say Gulf Coast Wrestling, what territory, what area are you talking? Are you talking about along the actual Gulf Coast? Do you include Dothan in that? How do you do that?
Yeah, that's it. I mean,
Okay.
I think they were doing 2 television stations. They were producing a show in Mobile, and they were producing a show in Dothan during this time frame. I think we might have discovered some of the Mobile shows, but we've got as many as 17 of those boys.
Wow.
That have never been seen on YouTube.
Wow.
So we're really going to be starting to bring stuff to people on YouTube that they're not going to find anywhere, man. And I think these people are going to find this interesting. These Gulf Coast television shows. The first one I saw a little piece of was Cowboy Bob Kelly. So it really takes fans back, and to our knowledge, they've never been seen on YouTube. And, now we're finding real wrestling history, man, that hasn't been seen in 44 years or more.
Wow.
Really old stuff.
Yeah.
That is pretty darn good quality-wise, amazingly enough.
Yeah.
So here's kind of the next schedule, man, for the week for Southeastern Rewind. On Mondays, we're going to add these new historic Gulf Coast TV wrestling shows every week, one every week. Every Tuesday, we're going to add a new Stud Stories episode, each of which is always about a different subject. Wednesdays, we're going to release the newest Studcast. We've been doing that for quite a while now. Thursday, we present another new Continental TV show from 1985, shown in the order they were produced. And fans really love those. And on Sundays, fans are going to keep getting the Southeastern classic films from the Southeastern Knoxville days until Southeastern is ready to take off. Mm-hmm. And we're working our way toward that. And something new every day, most of which has never been seen before on YouTube, is going to be available. Right now, that's what I want to do. That's my next goal, is to put something new on there every day.
Hey, that's cool. And listen, I've known for a while, you have a ton of fans in Tennessee, especially around the Knoxville area. And maybe I didn't realize how big the fan base was here in Southeast Alabama. So you really heard from a lot of folks, a lot of fans that have videotapes of all of these shows for quite some time now.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, these are Southeastern fans out of the Gulf Coast area.
Yeah.
In fact, Knoxville fans couldn't get these shows.
Wow. Right. Yeah.
They were only seen in the Gulf Coast area, down there along the Gulf Coast of the United States, up into, say, Montgomery, Alabama, mid-Alabama.
Yeah.
Later on, they're going to be in Birmingham. But, so we were at this point, we had shows going on in the northern part of the South, in the Tennessee area, and we had another set of shows going on down there on the Gulf Coast area. Totally different talent, totally different commentators, totally different show.
Yeah, all right. And having grown up along the Gulf Coast, and I'll say in the Panhandle of Florida over the years, I can't wait to see these incredible Gulf Coast TV shows from back in my younger days. That's what we grew up on here. So it sounds like fans from all over are really trying to help you out and build what is going to become the best old school YouTube channel in history, Stud. So way to go. And way to go to the fans, too.
Well, and I definitely appreciate the fans for their help, man, and they're certainly stepping up, and I still need their help. So if anyone out there listening has Southeastern TV shows that were taped from 1978 to the summer of 1985 on your home VCR or any other type of recording or copy of those shows, or one show or multiple shows, and they're pretty decent quality, contact me, and you can contact me on one of my 3 Facebook pages. Simply message me about them, and I'll get back to you. And if you're not already a friend, please go to the Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Studs page. It's a great one and it's the only place that you can go and like and follow me there, and you automatically become a friend. So then send me a personal message. If you haven't been a friend and you become a friend, send me a personal message about your shows, and I'll try to get back to you. And if you're a Twitter follower, you can go to Ron Fuller Welch and message me there too.
Wow, all of that is terrific news, and fans who are already fans are loving this, and now they're going to be loving it even more. So where else are we riding today besides Southeastern Pensacola, Stud?
Well, after today's training, man, we're going to start, we'll ride back north again into Southeastern Knoxville. We got another great double world title card, man, on a very unusual Monday night in the Coliseum. NWA champ, Harley race, is going to face off against one of his most unorthodox opponents, I'm sure, and that's Joe Leduc. And the card is loaded, and so is the TV 2 days earlier, and we're going to discuss both. We'll get the results of the championship card, and we'll talk about the attendance. In the learning tree, our question is, with so many great wrestlers leaving Southeastern Knoxville, headed south, who was coming to replace them? So that's a very solid question, and I look forward to answering that one.
So, well, and not surprisingly, it sounds like another fantastic Studcast, and we're about to get this thing underway. So tell us about how you managed to get down to Dothan, Alabama to take care of promotion business when you were working almost every night in Knoxville. How does a man do that? And they're about 400 miles apart?
Well, as a matter of fact, 500 miles, basically about 500 miles, man. And as a matter of fact, I was about to become a frequent flyer for the first time since 1973, 74, when I was going to St. Louis regularly out of Florida, and I'm about to enter basically the busiest year of my wrestling career, 1978. And I'm going to fly more miles and drive more miles in 1978 than ever. And I'll be working 2 territories at once for most of that entire year. So with only 11 days after the Knoxville Championship card that we're going to be talking about in this Studcast, 11 days later, we're going to have our opening night in Dothan, Alabama. And I was under the gun, man, to be quite honest with you, to make it happen in Southeastern Pensacola. But I was more organized than I thought. And only because I had discovered with my experiences with my first Southeastern territory that ownership by myself was difficult, too difficult, especially if you're going to have another territory. So this time I set my next territory up with 4 very important part owners as part of this company. And I knew that by myself, there was no way I was going to be able to run 2 territories alone. It was hard enough to run Knoxville by itself, much less a separate one 500 miles away.
Yeah.
So every one of these partners owned a small percentage, but with the agreement that they would do more than just wrestle every night. Let's start with Roy Lee Welch. And Roy Lee was going to assist me, and he happened to be a relative, second cousin to me. And, I felt like I wanted to get some family members involved because it was a great opportunity for them to do well and to learn more about the business than just what happens in the ring. So Roy was going to assist me in running the Southeastern Pensacola end of the company, as well as wrestle when needed. And he would be the guy who would represent the company, not as a part owner, but an employee only, who handled everything from advertising to buildings to setting up the rings and making sure that all of that was handling the box office every night and whatever basically was necessary down there in Southeastern Pensacola. And he was the guy that was going to be making that trip that you just mentioned earlier to Dothan, Alabama. Yeah, I wasn't going to be making this one. I was sending Roy, and he was going to start learning how to handle business, that type of business. So Robert, my brother, he was committed. He was another guy that I selected to be a part of it. And he was committed to booking the northern end while Bob Armstrong and I were handling the building of the southern end of the territory, which was going to be a big job. Take a lot of time and a lot of effort. And our original plan was, once we got both these territories working, was to switch the talent and the bookers in the 2 territories once a year, which that's a great concept there, to take all those guys that have been in Knoxville now for 4 years, some of them for 3-4 years, and run them south into Pensacola and let them stay there for a year with the same booker that's used to handling them. And then the next year, go back to Knoxville again. This was really a great concept, and we really didn't have the opportunity to make that happen. And we're going to get into that in 1979, why that occurred. But that was the original plan. Rob was going to handle the north end. Bob and I go to the south to begin with, then switch territories, entire crews and bookers. once a year, because that's about how long it took for a crew to get stale.
Yeah.
To where fans had seen him enough. So Bob Armstrong, Jimmy Golden, obviously another cousin. He was going to be involved in the company, and he was committed to working both ends and anything else that I asked him to do. And then I took someone that wasn't a family member, but who to me was one of the great talents in all of wrestling. And that was Bob Armstrong.
Yeah.
And Bob really appreciated the opportunity to become a part owner in a wrestling company. And wow, did he ever do a great job, man. And he committed himself to working on either end as necessary. Mm-hmm. Plus, Bob was great at acquiring talent. He talked to guys, and guys respected him. And he knew so many wrestlers that he was able to bring in guys that probably me or Rob or Jimmy couldn't have.
Wow.
And he was also going to do some booking if he was needed. And he learned to be a great booker as well.
Yeah. So how were you able to keep everybody's ownership secret all of the years that you were there? Or was it something you tried to do?
Well, I tell you, man, it was extremely important. I had been in Knoxville at this point for almost 4 years. And nobody knew I owned it, and I knew pretty much how to do it, and so yes, I was committed to that, and so I kept guys in the background as much as possible. They never told anybody they owned any part of it,
right?
And it was pretty difficult for people to trace down who owned this company. So I showed up at TV stations myself and at buildings occasionally. But when I did, I always went in there as kind of a representative of the company, just saying, hey, I'm here, to say hello for the Southeastern guys. And, and I went there to maintain a good relationship. TVs and buildings, that was extremely important.
Yeah.
And it was never common knowledge that any of us were ever owners the entire time we were there.
So it was just never said, so people could guess if they wanted to, but it was just never announced, and that's probably obviously the better way to go. So tell us what Roy Lee Welch did on his first trip into Dothan. What was that like?
Okay, so that's a good question, Dave. I mean, because people, I would want to get people in these trainings here an idea of what goes down. So Roy flew into Dothan, Alabama on Friday, February 17th, 1978, 2 weeks before the first event. And he was picked up by Charlie Platt, who was going to be the commentator for Southeastern Wrestling. He was the past commentator for Gulf Coast Wrestling. So, and Roy was taken to the newspaper to set up the ad for the first event. We were going to wrestle in the Houston County Farm Center. It was as you're very familiar with, a pretty big, nice building, and the matches were going to be held there. So Roy started with the newspaper. He got the ad set up. Then he was taken to the TV station to make sure everything was ready. We were going to start producing the new Southeastern show in their studio on March the 4th, 1978, the day after the first event. And he also brought TV advertising for the first event. While he was there, he set up interviews with some wrestlers that could come in there on that Friday, the day of the first event. And there he checked to see if there were any other programs there that it might help to promote the event. So, Roy I think he spent 2 days there at this point, just taking care of that type of stuff. And it was his first opportunity to do some of that. And luckily, I'd been handling towns for the Florida office, man. George,
right?
Wrestling out of Tampa, and I have ran West Palm Beach and a lot of other small towns around it. And I knew how to do it all. So Roy caught on to it really quick.
Yeah, I mean, and really, he made it sounds like a well-oiled machine, like Roy had done it many times before. But it obviously wasn't the first time you guys had dealt with this type of thing. So why don't we get a look at that double world championship Knoxville card for Monday, February 20th, 1978. I think you started really building this up last week.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you got the world champion coming to town, you usually build up for several weeks ahead of it, obviously. And this was a big card. Mike Stallings wrestled against the Hangman, who was a guy named Roger Smith, who was going to be on his way to becoming an assassin down there in southeastern Pensacola. Jimmy Golden wrestled against David Schultz, who was also going to be on his way to southeastern Pensacola. And in a special event with a no DQ clause, Ronnie Garvin was back again after Roy Lee Welch. I mean, he had several encounters with Roy Lee, and he wasn't able to beat Roy, and he beat the hell out of him, but he never got the pin. So, Ronnie Garvin was back again. He asked for a no DQ, and he was just deadly determined to hurt Roy Lee. I don't know really what there was about that, but he seemed like that's what he had in mind. Then there's a 6-man tag on this one. Anything goes, man. Texas death match. And that was Robert, the Tennessee Stud, and the Georgia Jawjacker were go up against Ron Wright, Don Carson, and the Assassin. Ricky Gibson was going to get another shot at the Mongolian Stomper Southeastern title. And obviously, Stomper was managed by Gorgeous George Jr. And then there were 2 world title matches. Tony Charles wrestled Nelson Royal for his World Junior Heavyweight Championship. And then Harley Race defended his NWA World Heavyweight Championship for the 3rd time in Southeastern history against Joe Leduc.
I'm telling you, that is a fantastic card, Ron. So tell us about the TV. Saturday, February 18th, 2 days before this event. Tell us what was up on the big TV show.
Okay, so, it opened with Les Running Down, which was another great TV card because it was rating period show, man. It was the 3rd week in February of 1978. So, on this TV show, we got one world champion defending his title on television. We got another world champion interviewing, and we got a Southeastern championship match and a 6-man tag. You can't load one up any more than that.
Right.
So, when the cameras backed away after Les, told everybody what to expect in the program, there sat Ronnie Garvin with him. And on the screen behind them was a huge still shot. It had Roy Lee Welch standing on the apron of the ring. And Ronnie Garvin was on the top rope, and Joe Leduc was laying in the middle of the ring. Ronnie Garvin was about to jump off the top rope in his throat.
Wow.
And there's Roy Lee, who have real good friends with Joe Leduc. And it turns out that it wasn't the first time that he jumped off that top rope and Joe Leduc. He had already jumped off the top rope in Joe Leduc's throat once. He went for it again, and Roy Lee had time to get to the ring. And so that was the still shot. There's Roy Lee had his hand on Ronnie Garvin's rear end. Joe Leduc's laying there. And so Les was about to ask Garvin his very first question, but he never got a chance to finish it. Garvin told Les that what had happened to him in this match was going to get Roy Lee Welch hurt real bad in 2 days. That this boy deserved it. And, that he would have, had it not been for Roy Lee, and he should have been on this TV today, Les, talking about how he was going to beat Harley Race for the NWA world title next Monday. And instead, he said, now he's going to be not going to be facing Harley Race on Monday night, but that cowboy punk Roy Lee Welch.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, Garvin really had a really bad thoughts about poor Roy Lee.
Yeah,
So Les broke in, and he reminded Garvin that this was the second time that he'd been on that top rope, like I just said, in the finals of the tournament, and to see who was going to meet Harley Race for the world title, that he'd already jumped off the top rope in Joe Leduc's throat once. But, that was before this shot was taken. So Garvin screamed at Les. He asked him a great question. He says, what difference did that make? He said, this picture behind us is why I lost the match. Because that don't make any difference that I jumped off in his throat. I didn't get the job done, basically, right? You know, and this story right here of him shoving me, that tells the whole story. So Garvin told Les he should shut up and run the video so fans could see what that punk did to him. So after a long discussion and that big still shot sitting behind him, the video started rolling. And when it ran, obviously it showed Roy pushing Garvin off the top rope. And, you know, when you get shoved off the top rope, you have to make a real quick decision, man, as to how you're going to keep from breaking a leg or hurting yourself badly, you know. So Garvin decided that his best counter for this was just to turn the flip. And he did. He landed on his back, and Joe Leduc had moved out of the way, and Joe just rolled over there and sacked him up. Crotched the leg, 1, 2, 3. It was all over. So Garvin screamed again, man, for him to stop the tape. Before it showed him count him out, it just showed Joe hook the leg, and he said, that's enough, you know. And he says, you know, he says, that match doesn't matter anymore. Not now. He said, now it's time to hurt Roy the Cowboy. He said, that punk could cost me a title shot. And he said, I intend to do just that in 2 days. And he said, he had a no DQ match with the Cowboy, and that was perfect. He said he could get even with the Lumberjack, because the Lumberjack was big buddies with Roy the Cowboy. And he said, when I hurt the Cowboy, he says, it's just like hurting the Lumberjack.
Yeah. Okay.
So Les, and Garvin's still rolling, and Les is trying to work his way in, and he started to ask a question, but Garvin left the set, saying, you know, the time for talking is done. He said, the question you should be asking me now, Les Thatcher, is not when, but how bad am I going to hurt Roy Lee Welch? So, and he left the set. So the studio erupted in boos, but the mood changed pretty quickly because Roy the Cowboy entered the studio. He was in the first match. So Roy made pretty good use of his rare TV time, and he won using his father's, Lester Welch's, abdominal stretch. Roy had been using that the entire time he had been there as a finish hold, and it was a great one, boy. And during the first interview of the show, it became even more apparent how much Garvin hated Roy Lee Welch. Garvin could only focus in his part of the interview on hurting Roy. I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you. That's about all he was getting said. So, you know, when Roy, I call him the laid-back cowboy, I guess, he was very complimentary of his opponent, saying only that if he kept being able not to be beaten by a great talent like Ronnie Garvin, he goes, sooner or later, he might steal a win from him. He might even beat Garvin, right? So, you know, his point was, I'm just in there trying to survive. I don't want to lose if I can help it. So the second match was the first of 2 championship matches on this show. Mongolian Stomper, wearing his Southeastern belt, managed by Gorgeous George Jr., entered the studio. Boy, that brought forth the chorus of boos. They didn't care for that tandem. So his opponent was a real surprise for fans. And he was the ever-popular Jimmy Golden, man. And fans let Jimmy know how happy they were to see the Stomper have to wrestle a real talent like Jimmy on TV for the belt, right? So Ricky Gibson was in the back, and he was actually going to be wrestling Stomper for the title on Monday night. He got a big round of applause, and he came out and sat down with Les at the set. And Gibson, like I said, was hooked up to wrestle for the title the next Monday night. And while this match between Stomper and Golden was great, tremendous TV match. And Golden had the Stomper going toward the end of it. And Gigi kind of got a cheap shot on Jimmy when the ref's back was turned. And the Stomper was pretty good at using Gigi. And he would grab a referee and turn him around to face Stomper. And then Gigi would get something done behind his back. So Gigi went down in his little normal the wear that he had every time that he came to the ring, and he grabbed himself something out of there, and he nailed Jimmy with it. It was like I said, the match was great, man, up until that point. Now, Ricky Gibson and Jimmy are very close buddies, and Gibson sees what goes on, and he sees GG do what he normally does, interfere in the match. And Ricky Gibson went from being a commentator with Les to being an eliminator, man. And he left the set, and he grabbed GG from behind in a sleeper hold. And the studio exploded, man. Obviously, match was still going on. Golden's down a little bit, but the Stomper left the ring. And he went for Gibson, because he's going to go out there and obviously help his manager. And he stayed out there too long. He got counted out. And Jimmy got his hand raised. But obviously couldn't win the title by disqualification, and they couldn't win it on a count out. So that didn't stop the studio audience from celebrating, though. They really got into it, and they got to do very little of that when the Stomper was in the ring. Usually, the Stomper didn't give the crowd a chance to do much celebrating. So when Gibson jumped in the ring after Stomper and them went to the dressing room and GG, then he raised Jimmy's hand. And those 200 people, about 200 people was in that studio in Knoxville. They sounded like 2,000. So GG was on fire, man. The next interview he did from Studio B. And obviously he was focused on Gibson's interference and how he sneaked up behind him, put a sleeper hold on him from behind. And Gibson and Golden, when it was their turn, they were just as fired up as GG was. And they said, wins over the Mongolian Stomper were very rare, and this Gibson and Stomper title match 2 days later is going to be a big match on that championship card.
Wow. That's pretty, I think that's pretty obvious. All right, look, I think this is a great place to do a break. Let's do that. And when we come back, we'll have the personality profile. And who is in this one, Stud?
Well, this one has the NWA champion Harley Race and the Canadian lumberjack Joe Leduc.
Ooh, yeah, because they are about to duke it out, and that is coming soon. All right, so in the meantime, while we're getting ready for the break, let's remember to find Southeastern Rewind on YouTube, subscribe, ring the bell to get reminders on when the greatest stories in wrestling will be dropped on YouTube. You ring the bell, we'll ring yours every time something new is ready. And be sure to tell your friends about Southeastern Rewind as well. Okay, so Harley Race and the Canadian lumberjack Joe Leduc. The personality profile is next when we come back on this Studcast. One of the best DVD collections ever done is the tremendous collector's edition of Continental Championship Wrestling. Get it now at tnstud.com. tnstud.com. Click Stud Store. 5 DVDs, 12 hours, more than 50 full-length matches with tremendous stars of the premier CCW territory. Worldwide talent, the Armstrongs, the Fullers, the Riches, Arn Anderson, Austin Idol, Exotic Adrian Street, Jimmy Golden, Lord Humongous, Kevin Sullivan and the New Guinea Headhunters, the Nightmares, and many more. A 5-star rating from hundreds of buyers. Don't miss this opportunity to own a piece of old-school wrestling history at tnstud.com. tnstud.com. Click Stud Store. Only $39.99 with free shipping. Hey, welcome back. Another Studcast with the Tennessee stud, Ron Fuller. I'm David Summers. All right. So, Ron, it is profile time with 2 huge stars. Tell us about this. This is really going to be cool.
Well, this is a really interesting situation here. Joe, he never got to spend a whole lot of time in doing a lot of interviews. So Joe joined Les, obviously, and they sit in the big chairs with Les, him and Les in the chair. And Harley Race sent his thoughts via video. So the fans loved it because it was live, and they could interact with both Les and Leduc. They were right there real close to Joe. And fans loved Joe Leduc. So Joe was as excited as I'd ever seen him at the beginning of this. And he told us that he had only been in the ring with one NWA world champion, Terry Funk. and that they were both bleeding in that match, and that he expected the same thing to happen with Harley Race, because he had a compliment for Harley right off. He said, because Harley Race was a fighter, and not just in the ring, but in life itself.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much true. Harley had that horrible accident, and they were about to amputate his leg, and he came back to wrestle after that. So Harley was extremely complimentary. And pretty quickly, Les got into Harley's interview, and Harley was a complimentary of Joe Leduc. And Harley was the kind of champion that studied his future opponents. He really knew guys. He did his homework, and he knew a lot more about Joe Leduc than I did. And that was saying a lot, because Rob and I, we've been traveling with Joe in his conversion van. He called it the Starship for almost a year, just about every night. And I watched this interview, and I realized, geez, Harley knows more about Joe than I do after a year. So what Harley knew was facts about Joe's Canadian background. He knew all about Joe's brother that had been badly injured by Ronnie Garvin and Bob Orton Jr. years earlier. That came up in his interview, and then he said something about Joe Leduc had a huge heart, and he had a never quit attitude, and then he talked about having heard about the lumberjack's axe that Joe uses for blood oaths when he wants to get revenge on somebody, and how crazy this guy is, And then he got personal, and he talked about what an ugly man Joe Leduc was.
All those kind words. And
he started off really good, and then he just turned to 360. Wow, he destroyed what he had said earlier.
Now let's talk about ugly.
So and he just came out and said, Joe Leduc is one of the ugliest men on earth, and he says he must have had real problems finding a woman to love him.
Oh my God,
looking like he did. Oh, it got really personal, and at one point he actually said he felt sorry for Joe Leduc. I feel sorry for a guy like that. So it was a totally different interview than I'd ever heard Harley make, man. But at the end of it, man, he was still the same old Harley Race. I mean, he said, regardless, for the pity I feel for Joe Leduc, he said, there's no way Joe Leduc or anybody else is ever going to take away this greatest accomplishment in my life. And he held up the belt in front of him, and he said, Joe Leduc, no matter how much you make me bleed, no matter how much you damage my body, no matter how close you get to making me give up, I'm still the baddest man on God's green earth. And he says, you'll never beat me for this 10 pounds of gold. So when Harley was finished, Joe, when the camera came back to Joe had gone from being excited and upbeat at the beginning of the profile to as angry as I had ever seen him.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
I mean, Harley Race, what had happened is Harley Race in less than 2 minutes had totally psyched Joe Leduc out.
Mm-hmm.
And he just totally got the job done. So Joe looked right into the camera, man, and he growled like an angry bear, man. And he told Harley Race that he had no right to say those personal things about him in public, that his brother and what happened to him, his acts and how he used it, and his private life with women had no business being brought up like this. And he said, I had some respect for you before you said these words, Harley Race. He said, but not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you better not pity me in 2 days in that Coliseum, because I'll be among all my friends and fans. And he says, now I'm going to forget about doing any wrestling at all on Monday night. He said, I'm coming for a war with you. He said,
wow.
He said, I'm either going to leave that building with your 10 pounds of gold, or they're going to carry me out. So Joe got up and he left the set, disappearing, man, in a very appropriate manner into the darkness of Studio B. It's like, wow, his attitude had gone just that direction from bright to dark. And so Les and the main studio audience, they were totally silent. They'd never heard anything like that. They'd never heard anybody get personal with an interview like that. And then they didn't expect Joe to go crazy. And, and I'd rarely seen Les at a loss for words. But I don't think he ever heard an interview like that either, So he closed it out by simply saying, thanks, everybody, for joining us for this personality profile. What else was he going to say?
Yeah. The closing is just the closing. So, wow. So, I mean, I don't think I've ever heard anything like that. I mean, so how do you follow something like that with the incredible Harley race whittling away at Joe Leduc like he did?
Well, I'm glad I wasn't in the next match, to be quite honest with you. And but it was World Junior Heavyweight Championship match, and thankfully Nelson Royal had a lot of heat, man, and it didn't take the studio audience long to get over the profile and to back into hating Nelson Royal, man. And I'd been trying to get good talent for these TV championship matches, and luckily I was able to get Wildfire Tommy Rich to wrestle Royal on TV. Man, in a world championship match. So gosh, it was really like I thought a feather in my cap, and what a tremendous match they had. They did a whole lot of wrestling in the match, and that's what I really, really wanted to happen. And then the Royal beat him right in the middle of the ring. But the fans always loved Tommy, man, and they cheered him when it was over, just like he had won. So the next Monday was the third time that Tony Charles and Nelson Royal had wrestled each other in less than 2 months. And one of those times was a title match. The other was a Texas death match. And they had begun to hurt each other and hate each other, man, at this point. And their matches and interviews were beginning to show that, man. So they went ahead and did their interviews, but wow, you could tell that these guys don't like each other. So the last segment of the show began at the set. It had Ron Wright, Don Carson, and the Assassin, and they watched the Assassin get pinned by Robert Fuller from the tag match from the week before, from the Sunday before. And it didn't seem to bother them much that, that Rob won the match and that the Assassin got beat, because all three of them were much more focused on the two men wearing the mask in the ring with Rob, the Tennessee Stud and the Georgia Jawjacker. And they certainly had nothing good to say about the Southeastern Commissioner, Don Curtis, and his allowing wrestlers who had lost loser leave matches to return with masks on. They said they were going to settle it simply by hurting maybe all three of these guys in the next match, which is going to be 2 days later. And all three of those opponents they mentioned showed up at the ring for the next match, and it didn't take long for a victory. And that I'm talking about the Tennessee Stud, Robert, and the Georgia Jawjacker. All six of us were in the ring at once. At the end of it, with Robert and the Tennessee Stud both applying a full leg lock to two of those guys, and the Georgia Jawjacker did exactly that, man. He sent his man, jacked his jaw, and sent him flying across the ring before he covered him for the win. So the three went to the set with Les, and they had the entire 2 minutes because their opponents had taken their interview while watching the video earlier. So the discussion about hurting their opponents that Wright, Carson, and Assassin had brought up earlier was the hot topic. And it was jumped on by all three of those guys at the set. And they said their matches were no longer going to be regular six-man tags. And the one 2 days later in the Coliseum was a Texas death match. So a six-man tag with Texas death rules. And they said it was the perfect type of match to end somebody's career. So the Stud and the Jawjacker complimented Don Curtis for being fair about everything that had happened to them, and vowed that the only way to end this history between the six of them was going to be with a bad injury to somebody, and it wasn't going to be one of them. The studio always loved that line, and 2 days later, the beginning of the end was going to be approaching.
Another huge TV. I can't wait until about 2 months to hear the numbers in the ratings books for those February TV shows. It's got to be phenomenal. So what happened 2 days later when you set everything up and you're ready for the Coliseum show?
Well, Mike Stallings beat the Hangman. Jimmy Golden won over David Schultz. Was to be expected. Schultz was going to be leaving. The Hangman was going to be going south. Actually, Stallings going to be going south too. Ronnie Garvin had his no DQ opportunity for 30 minutes. But even with that dangerous clause added to the match, Roy Lee somehow managed to stay away from Garvin enough to run out the 30-minute time limit for another draw. And Garvin was just furious at the end of it, man. He was like, he couldn't catch him when he had him, and the match got away from him again. So, he was going to take it a notch higher the next week because they were going to come back in a Texas death match, and that was going to give Ronnie Garvin his opportunity to do what he wanted to do with the Cowboy Roy. So 6-man Texas death match on this card was another wild one, man. Robert Fuller, Tennessee Stud, and the Georgia Jawjacker won the match when the Assassin couldn't get to his feet after all three of those opponents worked on his lower body until he just couldn't get to his feet, period. And that's what you have to do in a Texas death match. You get that 30-second rest period. You got a 10 count to get to your feet. And he was so bad that his lower body had been worked on by three of them so long that he just couldn't get up. So just like the last match, though, this one wasn't over. I mean, the fight just continued, and it spilled outside the ring like it had for a couple of weeks earlier. And the blood just began to flow, man. There was no blood until it was all over. And so the next match, the next week, there's not going to be a problem with that outside the ring stuff because it's going to be inside a steel cage.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the Southeastern Championship match between the champion Mongolian Stomper, managed by Gorgeous George Jr., and Ricky Gibson, was won by the Stomper. Gigi, still upset by Gibson having put the sleeper hold on him from behind on TV, got his revenge. And he knocked Gibson unconscious with something he pulled out of his jumpsuit, just kind of like he had done with Jimmy, and the referee was just not able to see it. And, so the first world title match for the night was the World Junior Heavyweight Championship. And it had two winners or two losers, depending on how you wanted to look at it.
Okay.
And it was a brawl more than a wrestling match. Those two guys had several tremendous wrestling matches, but now their matches were just brawls. And so both men got knocked down. Both of them just got to fighting with each other, and the referee got too close, and one hit him, and then the other one hit him. And then a second referee came to the ring just about the time Tony Charles had pinned Nelson Royal. And that ref rolled in the ring, and he counted Royal out. But when Royal kicked out after the pin, Charles went flying over onto the top of the referee's back, that second referee, and then Royal jerked Charles up, and he pile drived him. And about that time, the first referee returned to the ring, and the second one was still down, and the first referee counted Charles out as Royal covered him. So both men had won, and both men had lost. So obviously, in those situations, there was a long discussion between the two referees. The bell had rung, and it was finally announced that there was no winner and that the World's Junior Heavyweight Championship belt was going to be held up until further notice. Oh. So there was no champion, and then Nelson Royal was not the champion when he left. So there's going to have to be another match, obviously. So the last match for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship was won by Harley Race. And as Joe had predicted, it was a bloody battle, but Harley managed to pin after about 30 minutes of what was an insanely violent match. Wow, just a lot of blood. But fans loved it. It was what Joe had expected and what Joe was good at. And it also was what Harley was good at. Harley could do it just as good as Joe.
Wow. All right, so before we get the attendance, I got to ask that. But what about ticket prices? This was a big double championship card.
Well, It was $20 again for the first row. That's that Golden Circle deal. And that first row was still called the Golden Circle, but this time the next 3 rows were added to that front row that paid $20, and they paid $10 each to sit in the next 3 rows of ringside, which was considered the Golden Circle. Then they backed off the rest of the ringside seats about 10 feet from the 4th row, and those seats were $7 instead of the 10 that the people in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rows were sitting in. The first balcony seats were $6. The general admission was up $1, $4 for adults, $3 for kids, and the average price per ticket was just a little bit above $6 per ticket.
Okay, so what about attendance? Let's hear it.
Well, 5,650 attended there. Okay, 5,650. This is on a Monday night, bear in mind.
Yeah.
That's a pretty darn big card. So the gross house was just under 34,000. And that was equivalent, I looked it up, man, to being basically $146,610 in today's money.
Wow.
So on 2 back-to-back Monday nights in February of 1978, Southeastern had drawn 11,150 fans. 2 Monday nights.
Yeah.
Just, not normal days. So I'm going to do something this time, Dave, that we haven't done in a while, man. I'm going to break the payoffs down per person for this card.
Oh, yeah.
What we paid, okay?
Okay.
So Harley Race got $2,000.
Whoa.
Joe Leduc got $1,000. Nelson Royal got $800. Tony Charles got $800. The Mongolian Stomper got $500. Ricky Gibson got $500.
Wow.
Robert Fuller got $500. Bob Armstrong $500. I got $0. I didn't take pay on houses. I let it get split between guys.
Yeah.
Wright got $500. Assassin got $500. Carson got $500. Ronnie Garvin got $500, and Roy Lee Welch.
Damn. Wow. Okay.
And the 4 that were in the 2 opening matches, plus Gigi, all got $350 each. So that $600 average per man payoff was equal to just over $2,000 each in today's money.
God. I mean, you're talking about really good money. They really had to be pretty thrilled with that. Was that unusual, or is that a big night?
Oh no, man, that's a big night. It was definitely considered a big night.
Yeah, I would say. Okay, so that 11,150 fans that you were talking about, that's pretty amazing for 2 Monday nights, especially since it was not on regular nights or afternoons at all. So these payoffs were not bad either. That's pretty cool. All right, so Stud, time to answer the learning tree question. Let's see if we can work that in this week. His name is Greg Matthew, and Greg asked, with so many great wrestlers leaving Southeastern Knoxville, heading south, who was coming into Knoxville to replace them?
Well, that's a great question, Mr. Matthews. I mean, wow. And you ask who is coming to Knoxville to replace wrestlers moving to Southeastern Pensacola. And there were a lot of them. A lot of them guys were going down there. So I'm going to take this answer, if it's okay, Mr. Matthews, a step further than what you've asked here. I want to give you the names of the wrestlers that were leaving Knoxville, going into other territories. I'm going to tell you those that just going to be arriving from other territories, and those in the first Southeastern Pensacola territory, the initial crew that's going to start it down there. And I looked this up, because I really I had to dig to get the answers to this one. And all of these moves are going to take place by the end of May 1978. So basically, in the next 3 months from the time this event goes down, here are the people going and coming. So let's start with the present. Big name Knoxville Stars leaving to go to other territories and gone from Knoxville by the end of May 1978. One of those is the Assassin. The other is Joe Leduc and Gorgeous George Jr. They're all on their way to other territories within the next 3 months.
Wow.
And those wrestlers arriving in Knoxville by the end of May 1978, Dennis Condrey and Phil Hickerson, a tremendous tag team from the Memphis side of the state, the Great Malenko.
Wow.
Bob Roop, Rip Smith, Dick Steinborn, and the pro Doug Gilbert are both coming back. Wrestlers in the Southeastern Pensacola crew by the end of May 1978. These are the guys that are going to start that crew down there. Is Bob Armstrong, myself, Tony Charles, Roy Lee Welch, Leon Baxter, the wrestling pro, David Schultz, Eddie Mansfield, Mike Stallings, Eddie Sullivan, and Roger Smith and Randy Colley. The two assassins were going to be managed by Rip Tyler.
I'll tell you, that's a remarkable turnover of talent and coordination of even the movement in this whole process, especially from the Knoxville territory to the new Southeastern Pensacola. Wow.
Well, stars were definitely coming and going, man. That was what was happening. It was the name of the game. It was the nature of the wrestling business back in those days. So great question today, Dave. When I started figuring out the answer, I had no idea that all this happened in just 3-month period of time in 1978. And my life, to be honest with you, man, at this point, it was kind of a blur, man. And so much was happening so fast. Wow, I was having a hard time making it from day to day.
I mean, at 30 years of age, and it was a blur. I can't imagine that, Stud, with all you had going on. All right, I tell you what, another absolutely fascinating Studcast is now in the books. I'm sure there's never been a wrestling podcast ever that covers the history of what an owner was doing daily to develop wrestling companies in America. The cards, the angles, the sizes of the crowds, and in this one, even the wrestlers' payoffs were discussed. I thought that was pretty cool. Every one of these Studcasts is absolutely, truly historic. And folks, I tell you what, Facebook for Ron, do not friend request the Stud on his Ron Fuller Welch Facebook page. It has a maximum of 5,000 fans. It's been full for years. To become friends with him on Facebook, simply go to either his Ron Fuller the Tennessee Stud page or his Ron Fuller Welch author page. You can like and follow him there. You'll automatically become friends that way. Anything that happens on one page happens on all of the pages, so you never miss out. On Twitter, follow him as Ron Fuller Welch. Easy to find. YouTube Southeastern Rewind is where you find everything Ron Fuller Welch. Continental and USA TV shows, they're all there. Now, Gulf Coast TV wrestling shows go up every Monday. Don't miss new Stud stories every Tuesday, new Studcast every Wednesday, just like this one, a new Continental TV show every Thursday, and a new Southeastern Classic Films, never before seen on YouTube, every Sunday. Subscribe now. Ring the bell icon and find the fastest growing old school wrestling YouTube channel in the world. Every time something new is added to the channel, we'll ring your bell. You'll be the first to know. Find everything on Ron's website, tnstud.com. It's famous, tnstud.com. Studcast, Super Studcast, historic videos, photo gallery, his stud store with souvenirs of all kinds, autograph photos, tremendous Continental DVD wrestling 5-packs. Folks have been loving these things for years, and we've still got plenty. T-shirts, Tennessee Stud mask, and his chilling novel, Brutus. Check it out now. It's all at tnstud.com. Man, I don't know how you keep up with it, Stud. So where do we ride next week? What's happening on the next Studcast?
Well, in today's training next week, we're going to be in the WTVY TV studio in Dothan, Alabama. And
Wow.
We'll be there to prepare for the first Southeastern Pensacola TV show ever done. And we'll be discussing the set behind the host, Charlie Platt, what type of set we're going to have. We'll be talking about an educational visit with the station employees in the control room. I'm actually going to be teaching them how to do an instant replay among some of the other technical firsts that we're witnessing for the first time that they had never seen before in the wrestling program.
Wow.
So we're going to be focusing on the great Knoxville card of Sunday, February 26th. It's got a 6-man cage match. It's got Tony Chaw's first ever shot at the Mongolian Stomper Southeastern title. It's got a Texas death match between Ronnie Garvin and Roy Lee Welch, plus 3 other matches. And it'll be the last February TV in the rating period, and it'll obviously be loaded again. So we're going to talk about that TV show, promoting the card, the results of the card, and the attendance of that card. And the Learning Tree question next week is another great one. It's asking why Pensacola was becoming the home for the new territory rather than Mobile, Alabama, the home city my father chose in 1954 when he opened Gulf Coast Wrestling there. So I want to thank everyone for listening today and their support for the Southeastern Rewind YouTube channel. Please tell your friends and neighbors about us. Take care of yourselves out there and others, and may God bless us all.
All right. For Ron Fuller in the Great Smoky Mountains, I'm David Summers saying thank you again for listening. Find me at davidsummersproductions@gmail.com. This Studcast is a David Summers production for Tennessee Stud, LLC.
Thanks for joining us today for this historic Studcast. The true story continues next week. So full Nelson your friends and point them in our direction for another ride with the Tennessee Stud.
1, 2, 3.
This is David Summers saying so long from the Great Smoky Mountains.